Hello, good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to everyone for joining the session. So let us start the session by playing the national anthem for UAE. Thank you. So firstly, welcome everyone for this particular session on cryptocurrency and its compliance and regulatory matters for businesses dealing in crypto. It's quite a privilege and honor to present this particular topic, which is quite an interesting and which is quite hot topic across the world right now. So let me quickly take you through the agenda for today's topic. Firstly, we are going to discuss how Dubai is becoming a global hub for cryptocurrency. We have our guest speaker, Mr. Sakar Eriket, as well, who will provide his thoughts and views on how Dubai is becoming crypto hub going forward. Thereafter, Mr. Alok Desai will present and discuss on how to manage the typical risk and adhere to compliance requirement in terms of cryptocurrencies and the businesses in UAE. Thereafter, my colleague Ms. Deepika Chandak will present the global mobility issues. What are the issues in terms of relocating talented personnel across the world? Because we are living in a world where people generally moves from one place to another. So it's quite interesting to hear her perspective on this topic. And at the end of the session, I will discuss the recent introduction of the corporate tax in UAE. So which is also one of the hot topic in UAE right now, and how it is going to impact to cryptocurrencies businesses and the income generated from the activities. So without further delay, we'll move on to the to discuss with Mr. Sakar Eriket. Deepika, can you just go on to the next slide? Yes, thank you. So just a quick round of introduction for Mr. Sakar Eriket. Sakar is a co-founder and a managing partner of Crypto Oasis Santio, which is the ecosystem of investment structure of Crypto Oasis. Sakar has been associated with in the past with large multinational corporations, as well as he has assisted few government organizations as well. In a nutshell, Sakar is a blockchain expert and associated with many blockchain related organizations and provides his expertise on this particular topic. So it would be privileged to have you on this particular webinar, Sakar, and would be good to have your words and thoughts on this particular topic. So we welcome you on this particular webinar. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and also speak to your attendees wherever you are. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you virtually to Crypto Oasis. Crypto Oasis is the ecosystem for blockchain and cryptocurrencies here based out of Dubai particularly. I'm speaking to you from the 48th floor of the Almas Tower. For anyone that is here in Dubai, that is the heart and center of the DMCC, and outside we have more than 200 companies who have registered here since April to date, which we've supported with the DMCC in getting licensed here in the UAE.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sakar. Thanks for the introduction. So let us move forward with the few questions that we generally have in terms of crypto businesses and cryptocurrencies. So the first question. So, Saker, can you just provide a brief about what are cryptocurrencies? That is the most basic questions which everyone has in the mind. What are these cryptocurrencies? Which is the hot topic in UAE at the same time across the world, and how presently it is being used by businesses and individuals to undertake the business activity or for the investment purpose. So, if you can just provide your perspective on for the audience, that would be great.
Sure. So starting with cryptocurrencies, cryptocurrencies were brought to us by something called the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, where an unknown person until today called Satoshi Nakamoto issued this concept of using something called blockchain technology for the creation of something called Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and with Bitcoin came this onset of blockchain. So let's differentiate between cryptocurrencies and blockchain, right? Blockchain is the enabling technology. Cryptocurrencies are one of the applications of blockchain, right? If we look at cryptocurrencies, fast forward to 2022, there's more than 13,000 listed cryptocurrencies. It's an absolute jungle out there. You know, if there's one thing that I would like to tell the entire audience is that please educate yourself before you go into anything in particular. We have the MCC Crypto Center here. There's other entities here in Dubai, such as the Dubai Blockchain Center, where you can go get educated and understand this area better and better. So a word of caution before anything else, a word of advice to educate yourself, please. The information is out there, it's online, it's by trusted sources such as the World Economic Forum, such as Princeton University. Everyone is putting the knowledge out there for free. What we also need to say about cryptocurrencies have reached their all-time high in the past year. So generally speaking, we've seen cryptocurrencies rise to levels that we've not seen before, right? And with that, obviously, again, a word of caution, right? Because if something is at its all-time high, the risk for it going down is always large. Now, you're speaking to someone that believes in this more than anything. I'm a big believer in cryptocurrencies. I'm a big believer into blockchain technology and the benefit of blockchain technology. So I do believe this is wider than just cryptocurrencies, but cryptocurrencies, metaverse, NFT are grabbing the headlines today. People do forget about the underlying technology that is blockchain, right? If you think about how blockchain and cryptocurrencies are related, think about how cement or concrete is related to a building. Cement or concrete, if you look around you right now, if you're in an office area, or even if you're sitting outside, you'll be able to see cement or concrete in front of you. But with cement and concrete, just looking out of the window here, having a wonderful view from the 48th floor, I can see roads, I can see parking lots, I can see high towers, I can see a power plant in front of me, I can see silos. They're all made out of concrete, but each one has a different use case, right? So this is the same way you would I'd like to bring closer to you. Think about blockchain to cryptocurrencies as you would think of concrete to a building. You can build hospitals, you can build hotels, you can build a shelter, you can build a bench that you sit on, whichever way you can think of the application. Just one of the applications, and this is cryptocurrencies. Let's think of houses, for example. But one of the application is using blockchain for cryptocurrencies. How are they being used by businesses and individuals? Cryptocurrencies, particularly right now, are yet to take off for a wide adoption use case other than speculating. A lot of people are buying cryptocurrencies. A lot of people are investing into cryptocurrencies. And here again, a word of caution: when you're investing, please invest wisely. Please do not go into, early stage tokens. Although we invest actively into early stage tokens, I caution people, you have to take into consideration that early stage tokens and early stage cryptocurrencies have a big risk attached to them, right? So, if you want to dabble today, I'd stick with Ethereum or Bitcoin, but this is, again, not financial advice, but I feel everyone should be exposed with a very small amount, whatever a small amount to you is. People think that you can't buy Bitcoin just because it's at $40,000. You can buy Bitcoin for $10, for $100, and actually be exposed to this entire equation, right? So cryptocurrencies today are being used in various ways all around the world. When you think about cryptocurrencies, there's two differentiating factors I'd like you to consider. The first one is decentralization, right? And with decentralization comes permission or permissionless, right? So you could have cryptocurrencies that still do not offer this decentralization factor, right? And you can have cryptocurrencies where someone needs to provide you permission to participate. Just to make sure that I don't lose the audience in this, think of China, for example. China today has its own what is being called central bank digital currency, CBDC, right? And this is something also you're going to read in headlines a lot. CBDCs are on the far other side of decentralization. CBDCs are completely centralized. China can control the flow of cryptocurrencies that are being offered into the market, right? And with that obviously comes a benefit and an opportunity and a threat, right? The opportunity is that you can let go of fiat money and you can let go of printed monetary value. The downside is that, think about if all of your money is in a digital form today, it can be frozen immediately, right? So there's an opportunity and a threat. On a stark contrast to the Bitcoin blockchain is currently the most decentralized blockchain, the longest running blockchain that is in circulation today, where no one person can control whatever you do on the Bitcoin blockchain. You can be traced, you can be, there's an insight to it, but no one, unless you give away your keys, no one can actually come and let's say, put an embargo on what is in your wallet. Right? If we think about governments, how are governments using this? Governments are using it in form of CBDCs. They're thinking about it more than just in cryptocurrency terms, but also how do we use blockchain to make our governments more efficient? If we look at financial institutions are testing cryptocurrencies to see if they can replace something called the SWIFT system. Anyone who's done an international transfer has used the SWIFT system in one way or the other. You've been asked for a SWIFT code. This is actually a centralized system which actually comes together to control this entire banking network that we are in. There are multiple ways that cryptocurrencies can actually help alleviate that. The last point on this topic, it's still early days. I've been in this equation since 2015, dabbling in it and investing in it and advising companies in it. Even 2014, actually it's 14, 15. And the matter of the fact is we're still early days. Wide scale adoption is yet to happen. So if you're reading about it today, I congratulate you. If you're here today and you're hearing about this for the first time, I congratulate you yet again. Go out there, educate yourself. It's still early days, and never invest more than you're willing to lose.
Thank you, Sakar. I mean, that's a quite good round of brief about the cryptocurrencies and how people are using it, and good to understand as well that we are the early comers, so that's something to take it forward. Yes, but that brings to the second questions from my side. How Dubai is becoming a global hub for crypto now. We have heard, across the world, we have seen the news on the crypto. Few countries are regularizing, few countries are have possibly banned the cryptocurrencies. But now Dubai has slowly, started regularizing this particular topic and the currencies. And what do you see? I mean, in terms of global hub for crypto?
So I'm, full disclosure, I'm a big fan of Dubai. I've had the honor and pleasure to work with a lot of government entities here and see how they work from the inside. A lot of what we see today in Dubai seems as if it's by chance, or it's just happening, or people forget. And while I'm speaking to you, I'm not sure. Let me see if I can, if this actually shows. Rishabh, maybe you can tell me if this actually shows or not. Can you see the view?
Yeah, broadly, yes.
Right. Okay. What you're looking at is the beginning of Jebel Ali Port, right? So this is actually relevant. I'm not just showing off that I have a nice view, right?
Great.
So Jebel Ali Port, to all our listeners, Jebel Ali Port is actually one of the early success stories of the UAE. And I say the UAE, not just Dubai, because, you know, people always forget that we are in the UAE. Dubai is, you know, by design, one of the on the forefront of international expansion. Now, why am I talking to you about Jebel Ali Port if he's asking me about cryptocurrencies? Now, without a doubt, today, Dubai is a trade hub for all the world, for the entire world. Now, it being a cryptocurrency hub, you know, if you speak to a believer like me, I will tell you, yes, 100% it is. But maybe if you speak to someone in Brazil, they haven't necessarily heard of Dubai, right? And again, my notion is this is all by design, and this doesn't happen overnight. It may appear to us as end consumers that this happened overnight, but it hasn't. Back to Jebel Ali Port. The UAE became the UAE only in 71, right? But by 71, designs for Jebel Ali Port, or maybe even they had started construction on Jebel Ali Port, making it one of the global trade hubs, logistic hubs in the world. Now, fast forward 2000 to 2002, 2003, suddenly everyone's like, oh, suddenly Dubai appeared out of nowhere, and you know, they're now a trade hub. It's not the case. This is a plan that was very well executed and designed, and we are lucky enough, anyone that's here in Dubai, to reap the benefits of the fantastic leadership of the UAE. Similarly, cryptocurrencies and blockchain. I've had the honor and the pleasure to actually be in the rooms when the strategies were being defined, and this was 2015-16, right? So what we are seeing today has been in the making in one way or the other since 2015-16. Now, because Dubai started this early, now suddenly everyone from all around the world were getting called, oh, we want to be like Dubai, we want to be like Dubai. The answer is very simple. You can't be this overnight. Dubai has started establishing itself as a hub for talent, capital, and infrastructure. And we in Crypto Oasis, we believe that the ecosystem consists of talent, capital, and infrastructure. And if you go back, and you can find it on my Twitter, I'm on DXB blockchain, so DX blockchain. You will find a pinned tweet that I have there by design. In 2016, they've already defined, we want this to be a hub for blockchain talent. We want this to be a hub for blockchain expertise and companies. And we want this to be a hub for government adoption of blockchain. So summing that all up, this has been in the making for some time. I myself have bet my life on this. I left my corporate job last year, and I started working on this actively even more on a full-time basis. While it has been a passion for me since 2014 and 15, I believe that the UAE, Dubai specifically, has the opportunity to today become the global hub for, or maybe let's not call it the global hub, one of the global hubs and the global hub in the region for blockchain and cryptocurrencies. What I can say from our side at Crypto Oasis, where we are defining this blockchain ecosystem, we today count more than 700 companies that are active in the space, out of which 250 are blockchain nascent companies that simply wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the term blockchain.
That's wonderful, and that's great to know the perspective on the Dubai from 1971 to 2002 and 2015 and as on today. So I mean, that brings the questions to the future. What do you foresee in terms of, you know, the crypto businesses in UAE in going forward next 5 years or 10 years down the line? We discussed the past and the present, but now that brings the questions to the future. How do you
Yeah.
foresee what's going to happen?
Now I've stopped trying to foresee the future, because in 2015 I was on stage and I was saying 5 years from now blockchain is going to be everywhere. Now, mind you, I'm very happy about where it is today, but I realized that, you know, things actually take longer in the beginning, right? Now I find ourselves in a very pivotal point. And these are elements that have not necessarily to do with just blockchain, but are socio-economical factors that have started to come into this equation. The first one is this rise of the gig economy, right? The rise of the digital workforce. And this started pre-COVID, but was also only accelerated at COVID times, right? And there Dubai has established itself as an open for business hub, right? Where I can vouch for seeing talent arrive here by the tens at the time, right? Seeing capital arrive here by the billions at the time. Not millions, billions at a time, arriving here in the UAE. So what I can tell you is that all the right elements are in place. How this will play out, I stopped trying to call out the future. What we are trying to do as a company, we're trying to ensure that by the end of this year, probably even earlier, maybe in Q2 or Q3, we will have 1,000 active blockchain companies. And blockchain companies being supporting blockchain companies and native blockchain companies. We need to differentiate, right? Think of a Microsoft or an Oracle, right? If it was for blockchain or cryptocurrencies or not, they will still be in business. But having said that, Microsoft, Oracle, Amazon, and the likes all have blockchain elements in what they do, right? So we are looking to count by the end of the year 1,000 blockchain companies active here in the UAE. I believe that we are well on the way to achieve that target. Think about, so in answer to that question, by now the internet is in everyone's pocket, right? We all have our phones, we're speaking to each other over the internet, right? If someone would have come to you in 2008 and painted that picture for you, yeah, you could have imagined it. Yes, there were science fiction movies around there, right? But really, no one could have guessed that it is really this large of an opportunity. And it's similar with cryptocurrencies and blockchain. We still don't understand the opportunity well enough, and I feel that new business models will jump up that we simply don't understand today. So in short, I think the future is bright, and I'm happy to be part of trying to shape it.
That's wonderful. That's good to know that future is bright in terms of crypto and whoever is involved in this activity or planning to do so in the future. At the end, Saker, if you can just like to provide a brief how Crypto Oasis is helping companies to set up crypto businesses in UAE, or the blockchain technology specialist, how you are associated with them. You already mentioned that you are associated with 700 organizations of the blockchain technologies. So how do you foresee, I mean, how you are supporting right now the crypto businesses and the blockchain technology?
Yeah, so I think at maybe a little bit of a correct, we're not associated with 700 companies, we're accounting 700 companies. What we're associated with, we're helping, we have more than 200 companies that we've helped from April to date to actually land here in the UAE. And this is also what we're doing in partnership with the DMCC. We're supporting companies to arrive here at the DMCC. There's the DMCC Crypto Center. Come by, visit us. We're on level 48 in the Almas Tower. Right, if nothing for the view, come by and see the space. It's a vibrant space where we have a lot of active companies here in the space, and there's currently we're counting more than 200 companies that we've supported. For companies here in the UAE, we support them with our network, with our capital, with our infrastructure. So from a Crypto Oasis point of view, we believe in the UAE as a hub for blockchain, cryptocurrency, metaverse, NFT, and we're actually walking the walk and talking the talk.
Perfect. Thanks, Saker, for your time and provide a brief introduction.
Sure, maybe a parting thought, Rishab, to everyone that is listening. I see that there's 45 people online right now, right? I'd like you to go on an imaginative exercise with me right now. Imagine 10 years ago. Imagine even earlier. Imagine you are sitting in 1996. Imagine that in 1996, someone would have come to you and told you there's going to be this great thing all around the world called the internet, which again, in 1996, it was already there. It wasn't just as adopted. Imagine that someone in 1996 would have told you only 20 years from now, the internet is going to be everywhere. It's going to be in everyone's phones. It's going to be on everyone's notebooks. People will have computers. They will meet people from around the world. We will do video conferences. We will send emails. We'll be able to pay online, shop online. Imagine if in 1996 you understood the opportunity of the internet. Imagine your actions that you would have taken towards actually understanding the internet more, trying to benefit from the internet, maybe working even towards that. The only technology that I can compare blockchain to in its impact that we foresee is the internet. So I want to leave you with, it's 1996 and blockchain is the internet. Take that into consideration, take that to heart, read about it, learn about it, get exposed to it. It really is a kind of place that only is a rabbit hole that will take you further and further down. I'm not sure if you can read what is written here behind me, but I'll read it out to you. It says, Bitcoin will do to banks what the email did to the postal industry. Regardless of if I agree with the statement or not, there is an opportunity here. Everyone here should understand it. Crowe team, I thank you very much for having me here today. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you and your attendees, and I hope this was insightful for you. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, Saker, for your wonderful thoughts and perspective on the cryptocurrencies. Definitely that it has helped me to understand the topic much more what it was before. So I'm sure the attendees would have understood the topic and would come to you if there is anything further on that particular topic. But thank you so much for your time and the efforts.
Thank you, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Perfect. So moving on, my colleague Alok Desai would help us understand how to manage the risk and how to adhere to the compliance requirement. So Alok, over to you.
Thank you, Rishabh. We've had a wonderful presentation just done by Saker, and he's touched base with many aspects of crypto. It was really insightful and nice to know information. What we are going to be now looking at is the risk management. When we speak about investments, no matter the nature of investment, there is always also an element of risk that we need to look at. And it's very important that we manage our risks well so that we get the returns in reward. When we look at cryptos from the global overview perspective, different researches have been conducted, and the researchers are of the view that the risk management ability of cryptos has been assessed keeping in mind the economic policy uncertainties. There are different school of thoughts in this. One of the thoughts says that the contrast to the risk management ability of the economic policy uncertainties is that these uncertainties are the very reason for the gains or the pump up that happens in the cryptocurrency. So the more the uncertainty in the economies would be giving the rise to better rewards with cryptos. However, some studies completely contradict this. They state that economic policy uncertainties have nothing to really do with the way the crypto reacts to the markets, and they're completely governed by sentiments. We happen to see a similar kind of happening when we compare it to the stock markets, where at times, although it's highly regulated, but market sentiments do play a very important role in the flight of price of a particular stock, or at times in its dips as well. And this is something similar that has been observed with cryptos. When we speak of economic policy uncertainties and the role that they play, in making of the crypto space, it's important to understand that economies vary. So every country's policy, every country's economy varies from the other. It's a very heterogeneous space, because of which if you want to use crypto as an asset to hedge against these economic policy uncertainties, you'd have to actually assess every economy in particular, in specific, and then take a decision. When we look at cryptocurrencies, and if we compare them with the other financial assets, one common question that may come to your mind is, how is it different from the traditional financial assets? So it's different because cryptocurrency has got no association with any authorities. It's a completely decentralized in nature. The financial assets, the traditional financial assets, if compared with cryptos are infinitely divisible. So you can really break it down. Like just as Saker mentioned, that although Bitcoins are very expensive, but if you're looking to take a position in it, you can, because it's infinitely divisible. When we look at any financial assets, whether they be stocks, bonds, or anything, they're always collateralized, backed by some asset, some institution, some authority. But that is not the case with crypto. With crypto, it is securitized by an algorithm. So it's not actually backed by some asset, but it's depending on an algorithm. There is a direct peer-to-peer one-on-one transaction. So if, for instance, I have cryptos and I want to get some service from you, I can transfer the cryptocurrency directly into your wallet, and there is no mediator, no government, or no any other authority that is involved in it. So these are some of the aspects what makes it completely different from the traditional financial asset class, but also one of the reasons why there is some speculation and concern with regards to it. Next slide, please. When we speak about the advantages and limitations of cryptocurrency, so there are many advantages of crypto. One is the access advantage. Since there is no authority or a third-party involvement, and it's based on a decentralized model, with the help of the internet, you can access your cryptocurrency from any part of the world. When we speak of security and privacy, because it's an investment and definitely security is very important, this is one of the most secure models because it's based on blockchain. And until now, blockchain technology has been considered to be as the most secure model. It also allows you better control. So there's more peer-to-peer control happening. But the challenge is, if in an event that you happen to lose your password, your keys to it, there is no way for you to really retrieve it. In case we compare this with the bank, when you're doing your internet banking, if you lose your password, you have an authority, you can contact your bank, you can have your passwords changed. But here with crypto, while you're dealing with your wallets, and if you happen to forget your keys, there is no way for you to really get around it. That is one of the major challenges. It facilitates ease of payment. The relative cost for making a payment in cryptos is much cheaper, more cost effective when compared to bank transactions and transactions using credit cards. Crypto can actually be used widely. However, it's not happening to the scale that it is being imagined of, because the retailers, the retail shop owners and others are not that savvy with this technology yet. Also, there is an element of fear because of the uncertainty in its pricing. Next slide, please. When we look at the challenges that this space is having, the crypto space is having, it has recently grown in popularity to a very high level, which has attracted attention from all corners of the world. From all walks of life, people have started to know that there is something as crypto. Many want to invest, some fear it. However, what has been observed is that there are many unscrupulous people who are also taking this opportunity, given the secrecy that it allows, the peer-to-peer direct contact that it allows, to use it as an opportunity to launder money. Many countries have therefore banned cryptocurrencies, but few forward-looking countries like the UAE are taking steps ahead to regulate this space better. We also have witnessed many investors who are taking the option of lodging their funds into crypto and making profits out of it, but are trying to find ways to evade taxes. These are some of the challenges that are being faced in this space for now. Next slide, please. There are risks as well. Every investment has certain risks, and so is the case even with cryptocurrencies. Firstly, it does not have a central authority. It's completely on a decentralized public ledger, doesn't have a central authority. There looms a risk of fraud and money laundering. There is also a theft of digital security issues that can arise with cryptos. We've observed that in case of cryptos, the Discord of this is also being submitted by the companies on Telegram and many other channels. And what happens is influencers play a very active role in the price swings that take place. There's very high amount of volatility that happens. Some researchers have tried comparing crypto with gold, saying that okay, it is as a safe haven as gold, but the data available for it is very limited, and so it would be difficult to say if it's really that safe as gold. uh, the challenge is that it lacks fundamental analysis and research reports, so the amount of reports available for someone to really look into is lacking. One of the major risks with crypto is the risk of capital erosion, since the market functions in a very vague manner, where it has sometimes the coins would really get pumped, and sometimes for no rhyme or reason, because of some influencer having made a comment, or some other sentiment being affected in the market, it may get dumped. And at this point of time, there is a risk of the market entering into a frenzy with capital erosion taking place. Similar situations do happen in stock markets as well, but they're highly regulated. So in case if a stock happens to go into an upper circuit or a down circuit, at after a certain point of time, the regulators do step in and they stop in the trading. But that's yet to be seen when it comes to cryptos. So these are some of the risks associated with cryptocurrencies. Next slide, please. Uh, as an investor, what kind of due diligence could you look at? So just to keep yourself safe, just like we would in case of doing an investment, any type of investment, whether that be traditional investment or a digital investment, there are some due diligences that you should look at. There are some cautionary steps that you should take to assess whether the investment is really going to be viable for you. One of them is you look at the team composition. It's very important that we have an understanding of the core team, of the nature of experience that they have, that they can bring onto the table, and the kind of funds that they've raised, the values that they bring. So understanding the team, the core team that is behind launch of a particular coin, and the way forward is really important. Just like you would assess stocks as a product, where you would look at the long-term strategy of the company, it's important that even with crypto, before investing, you try to understand the short-term and long-term milestones, and whether the core team is adhering to these set milestones. So this would give you a fair view or an understanding of whether we are heading in the right direction. When we look at when we look at other currencies, like for example, the risk tolerance is one of the main aspects that you have to look at, because every investment has some risk tolerance levels, and so it is with cryptos as well. Next slide, please. When we look at the approach of different countries, we have observed that Japan and Australia are the countries that have treated this as a legal tender, and they've also treated it as a property. So any gains that you make from it will be taxed. India is still in the stage of discussions on what kind of regulations should be bought, while countries like China have put a stop to it. But there are some forward-looking countries as well, just like the UAE, where they're in the process of having better regulations made, so that the space is more friendly towards this investment. Next slide, please. When we look at the UAE and the evolving cryptocurrency space, we observe that there are different regulatory bodies that are looking at it. Like in the UAE financial capital markets, we have the UAE Central Bank and the Securities Commodities Authority, and DMCC falls under this particular supervision. Now, DMCC has allowed the proprietary trading in crypto commodities as a licensable regulated activity where they are treating crypto as one of the commodities. Recently, there has been more development in this space with one of the new regulations also being important, which is the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. We will see more of that in the next slide, please. The most recent development has been with the independent authority that is being established under the Dubai World Trade Center Authority. This particular authority will oversee the licensing and the governance of virtual assets, NFTs, and cryptocurrencies. This law is going to be focused on protecting investor interests as well as at the same time creating a more conducive environment for businesses to establish here. So there's more for it, and we have to just wait for a while it gets published. But definitely, it's going to make this space more attractive for investors and for business houses that deal in crypto. Next slide, please. With this, I would request my colleague Deepika to speak on the next topic, global mobility. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alok, and also Sagar, for all your valuable insights so far. So now, just a quick introduction for myself. My name is Deepika Chandak, and I am the director leading the global mobility and consulting arm at Crowe UAE. Global mobility has always been very close to my heart since I am 10 years in this field now. And with the new nature of businesses coming up like crypto world, it only helps global mobility to be more and more dynamic in nature, considering that the world that we're talking about, the crypto world, is more a borderless workforce, which means anyone can work from anywhere and still things can move. So which means the global mobility also, the aspects of global mobility need to adapt and accordingly regulate the movement of people around. So just getting into what is global mobility in the UAE at this point in time. As we all know that almost 85% of the workforce in the UAE is expatriate population. So it is only fair that UAE would need some regulations around to regulate the movement of people and to make sure that that the talented personnel are relocating to the UAE and are well compliant, the employer as well as the employee are well compliant with the regulations around the global mobility. Now, we do understand that there is no individual tax in the UAE. Perfect. That's a good news, right? But is that all? Is that all global mobility is about? So can I just, can someone from Europe just take a flight, come to the UAE, visa on arrival, and sit in front of Burj Khalifa doing his work? From an immigration perspective, no, not really, because there are so many other factors to be looked at. While UAE welcomes you, as long as the compliance is also in place. So there are various factors apart from the no tax regime. There are various other factors to be looked at. I'll touch upon each one of them very briefly and then move to some scenarios which I could think of to present to you. Now, immigration, as I mentioned, it is illegal to work in the UAE without a valid visa, without the valid work permit. So that's one compliance. Now, the second is, as any other country, obviously, UAE also has a federal labor law in place, which was recently, there was a new labor law recently introduced on 2nd of February 2022, which is like a month old. So the labor law basically regulates the relationship between the employer and employee as like any other labor law. Apart from that, there is social security in place, which means especially that there's a bifurcation there a bit. GCC nationals, they have a different type of pension scheme, which is in place. And recently there are news that even for other non-GCC nationals, there is going to be some pension scheme which is being launched. So more and more news around the social security, but to be mindful that the employer needs to comply with the social securities as well. Needless to mention, there has to be an employment contract between the employer and employee before they start working in the UAE. This is all interlinked to each other, all these points. And can they work on a secondment agreement? If a foreign company can just send their employee here and start working? The answer is no, because you need to have a local agreement in the UAE, local contract in the UAE, which will need to be submitted to the local authorities as well. So there are some thoughts around, there are some compliances to be done around the employment contract. Insurance. UAE has a mandatory rule, it's a statutory requirement of having a local medical insurance in place. Now, and one of the last points is residency status. What is residency status? I mean, is this the residence visa that we get or the employees get, the employment and residence visa? Not really. This is different, that is from an immigration perspective. But at the same time, the employees would also need a tax residency certificate in order to claim probably certain benefits in their home country. So there is another concept, although there is no tax regime, but there is a concept of tax residency, which should be considered by the employee himself at his level. Now, what are the typical situations which we look for in the for MNEs in the UAE? The first situation is where the employees are physically present in the UAE, working for the UAE company. Now, that's a good situation, right? Yes, because you're physically in the UAE, enjoying the UAE, and also working in the UAE. But what do you need to consider around it? Immigration. Let me just give you loud questions and maybe not the direct answers for it. Immigration. Do you have a valid visa to work in the UAE as an employee? Does the employer have enough quota to hire more foreign national employees? And probably how many days consecutively can you stay in the UAE, or can you stay outside UAE? So these are the questions loud questions from immigration perspective, which someone needs to consider when someone is coming to the UAE. Now, from a tax perspective, if your employee is coming to the UAE, he would certainly be thinking about what are the implications for him in his home country. As I was mentioning, maybe a tax residency certificate from the UAE is important for him. Now, if such an employee is going on business travels, an employee based in the UAE is moving on business travels to other countries, then the UAE employer needs to be mindful of such business travels, implications for the UAE company outside the UAE. So it needs to be considered, well considered, before such plans are being executed. From a social security perspective, as most of the employees are expatriate, most of the workforce is expatriate, all their home countries may have some kind of social security available to them. Will that continue if they move to the UAE, or will that discontinue? If it continues, will it be sufficient for them? Is there something additional that needs to be done in the UAE from a social security perspective, apart from the statutory medical insurance? Loud questions to think about and necessary to be complied by the employer. Now, scenario 2 and scenario 3, I would like to just merge them. Scenario 2 would basically mean working outside from the UAE for the UAE company. Now, with the borderless world, if I may say also, and with the pandemic effect that we have seen, that people can work from anywhere and everywhere. So how does that work? Is it okay from an immigration perspective? Can I work from the UK for the UAE? Is it legally allowed? Do I still need a visa to work for the UAE company or not? How does it affect from a tax perspective, especially for the employer? Because a UAE employer's employee is sitting in the UK. Does that have any impact from a permanent establishment perspective for the UAE employer in the UK? Or even otherwise for the employee in the UAE? Needs to be well considered. From a social security perspective, what I would suggest is, the loud question that comes to my mind is, does the employee continue to be on the home country plan? If yes, then how about the gratuity which is due to him in the UAE? Will that still be paid to him or not? How will the labor law come into play when you may not even be physically in the UAE? So those are the loud questions in scenario 2, and which would also apply to scenario 3, where I am looking at hybrid work arrangements. So for example, anyone coming to UAE just on a business visit, or maybe an arrangement where you're working 50% for the UAE and 50% for a foreign country, which is maybe say UK. So how would all of these questions come into play in such hybrid arrangements? So all in all, in my understanding, global mobility is not just equal to no tax regime. There are various factors to be looked at, and for the employer as well as for the employee. So that's all from my side, and I would like to hand it over to Rishabh.
Thank you, Deepika. I mean, rightly said, tax is not one of the only topic, but there are a lot many topics to be considered at the same time of global mobility. But at the same time, right now, I mean, concentrating on the taxation part, uh, let us understand what is the UAE has, introduced the corporate tax recently, just 1.5 months ago, which is quite a big news for a tax-free country previously. So, Deepika, if you can just move on to the next slide, please. Yes, so just to give you a brief on the corporate tax regime in the UAE, which was just introduced in January 2022, UAE has committed to Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development as well as the European Union, and it is a signatory to few agreements as well. And that is one of the primary reason for UAE to introduce a corporate tax in the country. While the announcement has been made by the government, by the Ministry of Finance, we are expecting the law to be published by mid 2022. The Ministry of Finance has already clarified that they are working on it, and possibly we may see detailed legislations as well as certain guidance quite soon, maybe in few months down the time. At the same time, the corporate tax is going to be implemented for the financial year starting from June 2023 onwards. So that is particularly the effective date. So it's quite a big time right now. The government has given to the taxpayers 12 to 16 months window has been provided so that people can, try to restructure their arrangements, try to prepare for the new particular law, which was not there in the country in the past. And at the same time, once the law will be implemented from June 2023 onwards, possibly the first compliance will be due maybe in 2025. So that's quite a brief timeline on the corporate tax in the UAE. Going forward to the scope part, what is the next step? The immediate questions that comes to the mind is to whom the corporate tax is going to be applicable, which are the persons that is going to be impacted from these regulations. And while we are discussing the crypto businesses particularly, it's important to understand whether any particular business is going to be impacted or no. So the answer is yes. All the UAE businesses which has taken the trade license or the commercial license are going to be impacted from the corporate tax legislation's perspective. But at the same time, the individual persons who are also undertaking any commercial, industrial or professional activity, who have obtained a license or a permit from the authority to undertake any business operations, are also going to be impacted from this particular legislations going forward. Definitely. So all the activities, there are certain regulatory authorities which are also providing a freelance license and a permit, maybe for a part-time persons, or maybe you want to just operate on a freelance perspective. Even those activities, considering it is also a license and a permit, that is also covered as a part of the corporate tax, the coverage of the law. And at the same time, foreign entities and individuals who are going to do or who are doing any business activity in UAE by undertaking a license or a permit, definitely they are also the persons who are doing the business activities in UAE and therefore are going to be impacted from the particular law. But important point I would like to highlight is that all the free zones and the financial free zones as well have been covered within the corporate tax regime from the Ministry of Finance. But definitely the Ministry of Finance has clarified that they will continue to honor the tax incentives committed by these respective free zones or financial free zones by them. So in a nutshell, the law is going to be applicable to entities registered in free zones and the financial free zones, but definitely they may continue to get certain tax incentives for a particular period as per the respective free zones announcement or what they have committed in the past. So briefly, this is something that most of the businesses are going to be impacted. That is something needs to be considered for any person who wants to do a crypto business as well. Next slide, please. At the same time, there are certain exemptions that has been provided by the government. Definitely, the first exemptions is to the businesses and the commercial activities who are dealing with the extraction of the natural resources. That is something, the activity or the business on which presently also there are some point of or some portion of the corporate tax being applicable. So that is something that is going to be applicable as it is today. But other than those businesses, all other businesses are going to be impacted from the corporate tax announcement by the ministry. At the same time, the interest and other income earned by the individual persons are exempt from this particular law or legislations. One of the important point is that UAE ministry has exempted the salaried or employment income as well from the individual perspective, and correspondingly any savings from the bank deposits, from the interest earned by those savings from the personal capacity of the individual has been also been exempted for applicability of the tax perspective. Similarly, any dividend or capital gain incomes or any other income earned by the individual person from its personal capacity, that has been exempted from the law. So at the moment, the focus is on the business income by the legal entities or the individual persons is the primary persons who are going to be impacted, but the personal capacity income, be it from dividend, capital gain or any other sources, have been exempted from the individual perspective. But for the UAE businesses, any particular such income of dividend and capital gain is going to be exempted only if it is qualifying, it is falling under the definition of the qualifying shareholding. Now that is something a different concept. What is going to be the qualifying shareholding, that we are awaiting details from the ministry as well. But definitely for UAE businesses which is earning dividend or capital gain, maybe from crypto or any other activity, they have to understand whether they are qualifying for these exemptions or no. At the same time, a foreign investors income. So let's say you are the foreign investors, maybe residing in UK or Europe or some other part of the world, having a income from dividend, capital gain, royalties or any other investment returns in UAE from the personal capacity are exempt at the moment. Corporate tax legislations are not going to be impacted on that part, provided that is the investment from the personal capacity and not by way of undertaking any business activities in the UAE. So in a nutshell, the personal capacity income, be it a capital gain, dividend or any sort of such income, are not going to be impacted at the moment. But definitely we still have to understand once the detailed law will be published by the authority to understand in detail this particular aspect. The next slide, please. Just to give you a glimpse of the corporate tax rate in UAE, which has been prescribed for a taxable income up to AED 375,000, the tax rate is going to be 0%. There will not be any taxes up to a taxable income of AED 375,000. But if the taxable income increased, to more than 375,000 dirham, the tax rate of 9% is going to be applicable on those particular category. So definitely the mechanism has also been briefly provided by the authority, that for example, let's say the particular business is having a taxable income of, let's say, 500,000 dirham in a particular financial year. So the first 375,000 dirham will be taxed at a 0 rate tax rate, and the balance 125,000 dirham will be taxable at the rate of 9%. Now it's going to be interesting to understand how the taxable income needs to be computed. We are awaiting the mechanism or the rules for that, and once the detailed legislations or the guidance is published by the authority, we'll be able to understand much more in a clarified manner how to compute the taxable income, definitely. But at the same time, there is a third category which is mainly applicable to the large multinational corporations having the consolidated global revenue of, let's say, euro 750 million and above, or in terms of dirham equivalent to 3.15 billion dirham. So this is the kind of large multinational organizations which are also been covered as a part of the OECD's base erosion and profit shifting project. On this particular category, the tax rate has not been prescribed yet, but possibly we are going to, we are estimating that it's going to be 15% or more, which is as per in line with the OECD's BEPS Pillar 2 project. And we will come to know this particular tax rate in detail, I mean, once the detailed law is out. The next slide, please. And then lastly, I mean, considering today's topic is on the crypto, it's important to understand how this corporate tax regime is going to impact the crypto activities or crypto businesses particularly. So as we discussed, any particular business income generated by a UAE businesses, it be it from crypto activities or any other activities, it can be a auxiliary or secondary activities relating to crypto businesses. All those activities, since it's a business incomes, are going to be taxable as per the corporate tax regime. But definitely a specific guidance on the crypto has not been provided yet. We might have to wait for some time till the time that detailed legislation is out. We may see a typical guidance on what is going to be the tax rate or the particular income from the crypto, how it's going to be impacted. We still have to understand that part in detail. But as we discussed, any particular dividend and capital gain earned by the UAE businesses from its qualifying shareholding will be exempt. So that's a good news, provided certain conditions has been specified and that has been met by the UAE businesses. In those cases, the dividend and capital gain made, be it from the cryptocurrencies or crypto activity, would be exempt. But we still have to understand what will be those conditions and how the conditions are going to be met by the businesses. At the same time, the foreign investors we just discussed in the past in the exemptions, they have been provided the exemptions from any particular dividend income or a capital gain income from the crypto activities or any other activities. In that sense, those incomes are not going to be taxable in UAE, provided those incomes are from the personal capacity of the foreign investors and are not from any business activities within the UAE. So these are the few categories or few aspects that needs to be considered from the corporate tax perspective while setting up the businesses from crypto activities or cryptocurrencies. But important would be, as I highlighted, the detailed legislation of corporate tax is not yet published, and we have to understand well in advance, I mean, what would be the impact of crypto businesses from the corporate tax perspective once the legislation is out. But the more focus from the crypto would be whether the particular income is a business income or a capital gain income, because tax rate may differ depend on the category of the income. At the same time, whether the exemptions of capital gain will be available or no from the crypto activities income, that needs to be seen in detail. And globally as well, from the global perspective, most typical discussions from any crypto activity or crypto income would be whether it is a business income or it is a capital gain income, because the tax rate may differ, the exemptions may be available or may not be available, and accordingly we have to see these particular aspects from the corporate tax perspective. Next slide, please. So just to summarize today's discussion on the crypto from the risk perspective, from the global mobility and the corporate tax perspective, it's important to understand this different compliance and the regulatory aspects. Even the crypto field, which Saker and Alok mentioned, it's evolving, so we have to keep checks on these activities, this day-to-day updates. We have to understand how it's going to be impacted to your fact pattern, to your business activities, whether there are any challenge areas or whether any gaps areas that we have to understand and mitigate. So we have to understand those typical aspects for the new businesses in this space. At the same time, we have to take a timely actions appropriately with complying with the regulatory laws, maintaining all the documents, aligning all the contracts with the conducts. So it's important. I mean, whenever there is a new business, is setting up, it's important to understand all these aspects, and at the end, make a timely compliance. Have a check whether are you compliant with the regulatory authorities requirement or no, and take a timely updates on this. But the field is evolving, the topic is evolving, and definitely we would see more updates on this particular topic. And we hope that today's webinar have provided a glimpse of the overall aspects of the crypto businesses in the UAE and what are the different topics are going to be impacted from that. So with this, we end our session, and we hope that you have gain some or other things from the crypto's business perspective in the UAE. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any queries in terms of compliance or regulatory checks, because it's important to comply with this requirement to avoid any challenges. So thank you for today's time and attending this session. Thank you very much.